Get going. Oops, I forgot to turn on the other one. So, welcome to OMG Real Talk with your host, Anna Misting. And of course, as always, I am Flawsome. How is everybody this weekend? I must say, I have had a brilliant weekend. And as you know, I love my Sabbath rest. And this Sabbath, I have been so blessed with everyone, with all the sermons and the messages that I've received and people that have been pouring, that God has poured into me. So I'm really fired up for the week. So, I'd love to hear from you as to what you're fired up for. So, as I told you all, some of you that may know from Friday, I have a blessed guest this weekend, somebody who is going to help women, especially Black women, in their singleness. Now, I know, ladies, that you're all intrigued about that. Now, having looked at some of our statistics, especially in the Christian world, we have currently 67% women to men. That's a high volume. And that's just in the church. So what about outside? That's creating quite a caveat on relationships. So we definitely are having a lot more single women in today's society. And I'm wondering if that's just the case in society in the past 10 years, or has this always been the case, but it hasn't been so recognized and people haven't actually discussed it. Whereas now we're a lot more open, and that's what we do. So here we are. I'm going to allow my special guest to introduce herself, and we shall go from there. And we will talk about this amazing topic that I am just excited about and that I want you all to participate in. So, to my dear guest, who are you?
Hi, everybody. My name's Val Bernard Allan. Who am I? I'm a sociologist. I lecture in sociology in London and in the Berkshire area. I'm also a motivational sociologist. It's a term that I've coined to express my area of work. And I'm also a Christian. So I use sociology as a lens to motivate people to see that change is possible. I'm very clear that I do not present psychological lens because I think that that's very popular and very useful, but it's also important for people to understand the benefits of looking at things through the sociological lens. So, and by that I mean, if I say, for instance, that we have our bodies, our physical bodies, but for a sociologist, they're interested in the social body, which is society. What are the mechanisms that keep society going? I find that such a fascinating question. How does a particular society keep going? So based on that fundamental question, it sort of led me into discussions around sort of Black cultures. So what are the parameters of different cultures, and what are the systems that keep those cultures going, or what are the systems that change those cultures? So, that's what fascinates me. So, yeah, so that's me.
Fantastic. So I'm excited. You actually have a course that you will be running, and also you have a book. And the book is entitled The 7 Habits for Black Women Who Want to Marry. Tell us just a little bit about that book and what made you come to that conclusion.
Right, this book, The 7 Habits. Yeah, my little book, which is really a charter. In that book, it's like a charter, and it identifies some important principles that are necessary for dealing with post-enslaved gendered identities or post-colonial gendered identities. So the basic premise of the book is that something traumatic has happened in the gendered work of Black women.
Right.
And that trauma is connected with empire and enslavement and sort of the denigration of Black bodies and minds. And so the book is encouraging Black women who are involuntary single to begin to understand their singleness as a social reality rather than as a psychological reality and as a cultural reality. And as a result of that, to begin to apply different principles in their quest for marriage or long-term relationship. So the principles that I present are based on an analysis of society and what it is that constructs our society, and then to look at the trauma and the pathology that have impacted Black women's singleness from a sociological level, and then it applies spiritual principles as the solution. So in a sense, it's like a womanist, people talk about feminism, but womanism is more sort of Black spiritual feminist approach to liberation.
Wow. Okay. So so an example then. In relation to the book, we are exposing and exploring the Black woman identity within her singleness and in relation to her Christianity.
Or she doesn't have to be a Christian.
Because one of the things
she doesn't have to be a Christian to read the book and for the principles to work.
To work, right? Okay.
Her, yeah. But it helps. It really does help.
Okay, because one of the things that I looked at is, and maybe as well as from as a child, it was always something my father said. What is your belief system? What is your belief system? That's your foundation to then allow you to move on to the different areas in your life. And as for myself, there's the thing, is chivalry dead? And I know with many women, whereas years ago I observed that women were waiting to be found then by a spouse, and also they go with that saying in the Bible, the man that findeth a good wife findeth a good thing. So many would just sit down or be pretty and wait to be found. Whereas that, to me, the roles are reversed now. And where if a woman sees a man that she has an interest in, she will just go and, approach him or maybe try and pursue him. Does that make us, seem to be different within our singleness? Or how would that correlate to this? Should we just still, for me then, as a Christian, sit and wait on the Lord? Or should I be making more efforts to, as some people say, you got to put yourself out there?
Right. So you need to know how you put yourself out there. That's
right,
the issue.
Right.
So, I think that many of us have been influenced by feminist literature or feminist sort of narratives around what it is to be a woman. But feminism really emerged from a white middle class woman's perspective of gender.
Right.
All right. So and there's always been some tensions between white feminism and black feminism. All right. So the way that Black women do their work, we start from a different foundation because we're not starting from a position of privilege in one sense, in terms of society. We're not starting from a position of privilege. So some of the recommendations that you might get in self-help books, which is about, get yourself out there, do this, do that, can be quite, I think, detrimental to Black women. Right. So we need to know what that means for us. How do we get ourselves out there? So what I present in my work is the importance of the spiritual competencies that we have not lost. We did not lose during enslavement. That was the resource that got us through. Right. And what we've done, we've come to this side of the waters and we have diluted our connections to our spiritual competencies. We become more rational become more sensible and rational and reasonable in our approach. And the secret is to really go back to that spiritual competence that we have inherited, and to read the biblical narrative as the text with the solutions, because the biblical narrative has many interesting stories that reveal the workings and the principles of God.
Right.
And this is what is available to anybody, regardless of your nationality. These secrets, these interesting opportunities are there, woven throughout different stories. So my work is about unraveling that and then saying to black women, what does this mean for you? So they can take those principles and apply those spiritual principles that relate to finding a man. All right. And as I say to some women, in order to do that, you have to know how to respect the gendered laws that are at work.
Right.
You have to situate yourself in your power, and in recognition of those gendered laws. There isn't anything, like the law of gravity. If you're going to jump out of the window and you change your mind halfway down, you're going to go down. Doesn't matter what you're thinking. You're just going to go down, because that law is going to do what it's going to do.
That's right.
Gravity's going to take you where gravity needs to take you. Do you know what I mean? So the Bible says that the heavens declare the glory of God, and it also tells us that we can understand the workings of God through nature. We see. So God is always speaking to us in so many different formats, and that conversation is reinforced in the scriptures. But somehow it's all been diluted, and we've got caught up in doctrine and ritual and form, and the power of what God makes available to us is lost.
Okay. So I have a question. So coming from an African Caribbean background, when I have been home, and for me, home is Guyana, South America, which actually isn't Caribbean, but it's put in there, and to Jamaica. And I see women there. Here, I know it might sound silly. I don't often see as much relationships, but when I go home, I'm seeing the family units. I'm seeing many, husbands and wives and parents and grandchildren, and people still living in that manner. So is there an impact of westernization that maybe has also made us not be as available to our other halves? Because I look at the disparity of incarceration of our men in the Western society. That's a big impact. And then also as well, mixed relationships. And there's nothing wrong with a mixed relationship, but if you have more options, then, so to speak, then there's less for the Black woman who wants to stay and identify with her Black spouse. So does that have an impact on our singleness?
Absolutely, yeah. The fact that we're living in a Western society makes it more complicated. I think in the Caribbean, you see, there's a global trajectory, and the trajectory that I see is this: that there's like a continuum, and then there's a Black body on one end of the continuum and a white body on the other. Okay. And the Black body is seen as less valuable, and the white body is seen as idealized, right? And this is global. Doesn't matter where you go: China, India, Africa, England, Jamaica, Guyana, whatever. The world has colluded with this lie, right? So if you go to the Caribbean, you will see that, because there's more men there, there'll be more relationships, and there's a greater, even a greater likelihood of even sex ratios. However, in the field of relationships, men tend to choose women that they see as more white, whatever that is, either through looks or sound or whatever. They do that in the Caribbean. When they come to England, so they'll do that. So however that's identified in the Caribbean, all right, either through colorism or whatever. They will do, they make
or
those
tall hair, because I noticed that they say they like the tall hair. Yeah.
right. And then when they come to England, when they come over to England, then the field there's a greater likelihood
Right.
to choose
Yeah.
white. Yeah, so they choose white. In the
Right.
Caribbean, they may choose, you know, brown women may have a greater, they
Yeah.
have greater value in the field of relationships.
Right.
So in terms of, and it's the same in America and Canada and whatever. So those narratives are it's a globalized narrative, and they work and they manifest themselves slightly differently depending on what part of the geography you're inhabiting.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, I want to not have women thinking, oh, there's no hope. You know? There's always, you know, there is always
But
hope.
you need to know the truth first before
Right.
you need to face the truth. The Bible says the truth shall set you free. So if we don't understand the dynamics out there and you keep looking away from it, you're not going to discover the truth to know how it is you navigate yourself.
Right.
Differently.
I mean, because I looked at our parentage, and you know, looking at one of the areas that you cover within the course, like the spiritual strongholds and things like this. From slavery, sadly, intimacy and affection was not allowed. Because if you showed any form of affection to another, they would use that against you. So even though they had relationships and they were underlying, they couldn't show those publicly because that would put them in jeopardy. And so I'm looking at that sometimes. And even when I was growing up and with our parents, as I was saying, I hadn't seen, to me, and people can tell me if I'm wrong, because, you know, our audience is listening. I didn't see much of our parents being cuddling, you know, and intimate and showing, you know, you would have a sibling and where'd they come from, you know, type of scenario, because I didn't even see you lot hug each other or hold hands, you know. And it's only here that then I'm seeing, you know, couples, and it was always, you know, Caucasian couples, they holding hands and they linking arms and doing whatever. But I never grew with seeing many of my aunties, uncles, you know, and parents doing that. So would that also have an impact on our reflection of how to then interact with the opposite sex?
Yeah, it would. Most definitely. I think that the lack of warmth, or just, it doesn't mean that people didn't love each other, but the
No, of
display
course.
of warmth is representative of the trauma, you know, because if you think about enslavement and how couples would have to almost present their relationships in a particular way because the master was always threatening that relationship. So one of the things that people used to do as a survival instinct was to discredit each other. That's why we find it very easy to be very critical of each other. It was a survival mechanism. So, you know, if the man was overly in love and displaying affection to his wife in a public space, the slave master may want to separate them. The slave master may want to come into their house and take that woman. In order to denigrate the black man, he would just, you know, she could be there cooking her food and he would just come in and say, come on. And then off she would go and she would have to be with him. All right. By managing their affections in that way, it was almost like they didn't care for each other. It was a way of taking the spotlight away from their relationship. After slavery, the work that needed to be done for healing hasn't taken place. And despite many people becoming Christians, that work in recognizing the traumas of slavery and its impact in terms of intergenerational messages and and strongholds, that work hasn't been done. It hasn't been done.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at our society and even having conversations with our parents, that are some of them that were a lot more open, I did notice, and I've always been inquisitive, that when I asked people, parents never shared how they met. They might say, oh, the ones that are a bit more romantic. Oh yes, I saw your mum and I liked her from the first time I saw her, and that's it. But otherwise, they never shared how they got together, you know, what things were like, and you know, things like this. So I felt that, you know, slavery has still permeated right down, that we still are distant from one another. And even in modern day, you wouldn't want anyone to know that you liked each other, because if you showed that you liked each other, that could create a caveat. And so that's another reason why I think sometimes I have witnessed in churches where women have been okay to, because they want to have that intimacy with a man, they will have a relation, but they'll be okay with not having it open and public, which then gives him the opportunity to then have another relationship, because that's also not open and public, because we've just got so used to being undercover, so to speak.
Right. Okay. They have an interesting theory called the sex ratio theory in sociology, and the way that it works is that in any environment where there are more women than men, then women will be treated. The women will have greater freedoms, but they will be treated with disrespect, and there would be an increase in adultery, also same-sex relationships. Basically, the theory goes that whenever you have more women, that breaks down the moral fabric, if I can put it that way, of that community. Right. And then any society where there are more men than women, then men tend to respect women. There's less adultery, obviously, if in heterosexual communities.
Right.
You know, that the traditional sort of like idealized family is maintained, because there are more men than women. All right. So it's a complex but very interesting theory. Now, for me, that's got implications for religious communities where there are large numbers of single women and very few men. So just demographics, from a sociological point of view, demographics, you know, like the numbers, population size, influences, you know, actual numbers and gendered numbers influences the moral fabric of a community. It's not just based on people being filled with the Holy Spirit and doing what is right. There are things that happen when you've got too many women,
right,
as relates. And one of the things is that, so I'm interested in the way in which our communities can be places where adultery increases just because of those numerical tensions. So the whole issue of singleness for me is not just an issue for single people, it's an issue for married people, and it's an issue for moral communities. You know, like when I say moral communities, religious communities, you know, that really needs to be seriously addressed because of the pressure points that are placed on couples when there are so many single women. Plus the other things that we said, if you can it becomes even more intense when you think about sort of post-slavery issues, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So our churches can be spaces, they can almost become harems, you know, where there's like pockets of men, and that man is surrounded by his wife's friends.
Right.
And the pressure points that's placed on that man because he's part of that sort of like
community.
That creates, very different dynamics and very different tensions and, you know, etc. But can I share some things about my research and some of the so
because I was trying to come on to that, to what you found out from the women that you I would say were interviewed and researched, because you said you've interviewed some actually wrote some aspects, some did surveys, and what was that correlation? I definitely would like to know more about that.
Yeah, so there's PhD research on Black single Seventh-day Adventist women.
Oh, right? Woo. That's a scary topic.
Yeah, very interesting. So shout out to all the women that participated in the study.
Right.
So I did in-depth interviews, I did written narratives, focus groups, and questionnaires. So I had a range of different methods.
Information kind of, yeah.
In terms of the findings, there are, if I was to ask anybody, like, what do you think were the main findings? And most people can work it out. That's what's interesting about sociology, that you get really obvious results.
Right.
But then when you break those obvious results down, it then reveals novel findings, unusual findings. So my main results, in my chapters, I focus on 4 main themes. One of them is that marriage is centralized. So when you ask single women to talk about their experiences and how they situate their singleness, marriage is a very big part of that narrative. So single women talk about being single in relation to marriage, right?
Right. Okay.
So marriage is centralized. If you're going to centralize marriage and you're single, then it means that your singleness is problematic.
Right. Right. Okay.
So it's almost like because you use narratives that position your singleness as a transitory identity. It's not. It's an unwanted. Your singleness very few women in my study wanted to be single.
Right.
Right? Some did, but some of them didn't care. But the majority were saying, I don't want to be in this state. I want to be over there. I want to be married.
Right.
So you centralize marriage, which means that your narrative around your singleness is problematic. Then because you are in a Christian community, one of the main issues that you have to contend with is being celibate, right? So single women in my study demonstrated that they're working very hard to maintain a credible identity. And a credible identity as a single woman is to be celibate.
Right.
But that celibacy is a troubled identity because it's an unwanted identity. And it's an identity that is prone to, I use the word penetration. It's an identity prone to penetration because of the sex ratio issues. So she's there working up her single identity as a celibate identity. But then, you've got potential predators that you're having to sort of like navigate around. And then the celibate identity is also an identity that signals failure. So on one hand, it means being virtuous and whatever, but as you age, it begins to signal failure.
I was going to touch that because up until say 30, to be celibate and single is still okay. They think you've gone to college or university and you're building your career. But once women, I've noticed, start to hit 30, they start to get concerned. And once they hit 33 to 35, what's wrong with me? Why am I still single? I'm now educated, I'm this, I'm whatever. But now I don't have a partner. And in the church makeup, it's like, well, what's wrong with them? Now, it's very, I feel it's unfair because a man can be 35, 40, even 45 and not be married. And no one questions whether, something's wrong with him. But a woman now, then it's a problem. And then you'll have silly people making comments like, what's happened? You're not getting married or you don't want to get. Why would you even come and bring that type of conversation to someone?
Right. So, so that what you've just explained there in terms of celibacy, it does show. In sociology, you're asking people, what do you think, what do you feel or whatever, but you're only asking them not to understand it on a psychological level. You're asking them so you can see what narratives are there operating in society or the society that they're living in. So in society and within religious communities, to be an adult and to be a productive and to have a credible identity as an adult, you need to be sexually engaged. All right. You need to be in a relationship. You need to be coupled. So society has a very powerful narrative of being coupled, whether it's a heterosexual or homosexual.
Right.
Right. So that's an important narrative. You're supposed, so that is why you talk about age, so when they get to 30 or whatever, And you think, well, why? You know, like, because before they weren't single. You know, when you're 15, nobody says you're single.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, you're 18, nobody says you're single. But then one day you think, am I single?
Yeah,
That says something about society's interpretation of age and what should be happening at a particular age. And it varies differently with different societies, but generally it's around about 28, 30.
mm,
And also biological clock and whatever. So coming back to celibacy now, so there it's a conflicted identity because it's a virtuous identity, but it's a moving target. And as it moves, you know, in terms of age, as I said, you become hyper visible. The fact that you're not sexually engaged is it becomes hyper visible. So negatively so. So
right,
that's it. So then, and then the fourth finding, significant finding, is that spirituality becomes a resource.
right.
Spirituality then becomes something that Black women use as a mechanism to cope with marriage
Right,
is centralized,
right. Yeah.
singleness is problematic, celibacy is troubled. So
Mm,
they cling to their spiritual identity. And like one woman that I interviewed, I asked her to just tell me, you know, who are you, right? So I'd ask a few women this question, and they'd say, "I am blah blah blah, whatever, whatever." But and that would the question, that would be the answer would be over in about 3 minutes. And
right.
this woman took about 45 minutes to
Wow.
answer the question who she was. And as she answered the question, what she was doing was she was repositioning herself because she knew that my questions were going to be about being single, and she saw singleness as failure. So what
Uh,
she had to do, she had to set up her stall before and really explain to me how spiritual she was and that she was chosen by God and
oh,
how she became converted. You know,
okay.
a very powerful story.
Yeah.
But I was sitting there thinking, oh, she's still talking about it. And I, you know, like, oh, she's still talking about I want to get onto the second question, but I couldn't, obviously, I had to
Right.
wait.
You have to wait.
But then
Yeah.
it took some time to realize, oh, she's setting up her stall so that she's grounded herself in her spiritual identity before then having a conversation about the area of her life that she found very difficult. All
Mm.
right. So spirituality becomes the
A bit of a
the
crutch, kind of. Would you? I mean,
legitimacy,
yeah. Okay.
you know, yeah, legitimacy. And yeah, you could say crutch, but I think it's more, I think crutch is doesn't
Sounds
doesn't give,
it sounds more negative and not as fair as to really what their situation is. I mean,
it becomes an important resource
right,
to
right,
survive their troubles,
right,
and so I come up with these four findings, right? And then I start digging deeper into what's going on. What is it? What? How do these findings then tell me something about society,
right,
right? And what I discover is like, number one, that celibacy is something that Black women, one of the identities of Black women is that they're celibate and they are involuntary celibate, whether or not they're in the church. That celibacy is now
right,
a racialized identity. You know, that a feature of Black women's identity is either permanent celibacy or long-term celibacy. These are single women. So women
right,
who are unchurched talk about finding it difficult to have relationships with men, and they have long bouts of celibacy. You know,
right.
so that now then adds a new dimension on what it means to be a Black woman. Do you see?
Mm.
Then the
Yeah,
other thing
definitely.
that one of the other things that came up was this narrative. So all the women that I spoke to, they spoke about being strong Black women, you know, strong Black women. You just like, so for me, it's like, where does that come from? It's so consistent in self-definition. So you think, where did that come from? Where did they learn this narrative? Where does it come from? And what is its function? What is its function for society now? What is its function for Black women? But what does it mean for Black culture? And what does it mean for white culture? And where did it begin? So, you know, you start asking questions
Right.
around that. The other thing is about what did I referred to anomic masculinities. You know, anomy is like normlessness and chaos. And, you know, so the way that they describe Black men is that they are really
Slaves.
problematic. They are unavailable.
Right.
You know, and all of that. So unavailability is emotionally unavailable, but also they are unavailable because they marry outside. They tend to, large numbers of them are outside of their race,
Mm-hmm.
marry outside of their race, and also incarceration rates or unemployment. So there's a
Right.
very strong narrative of pathological Black man, and it stands beside strong Black woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these are some, I mean, there's so much more, but these are some of the things. Pigmentocracy comes out, you know, and the way in which there is this, as I said, this sort of narrative about
Like a class system in our colors. Yeah.
hierarchies. So,
Yeah.
so when you start digging deep now, you start seeing these narratives coming through. So these are Adventist women. You don't get 2,300 days and then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. These Adventist women are using narratives that women in wider Black women in wider society are using. So it's
Right.
something that is really consistent that needs to be looked at. So then,
Right.
yeah, so I'll stop there and let you ask me another question.
Right. Well, I was going to look at, you know, the mindset which we have, you know, we're crossing on to. You know, we are now in the West, supposedly, and we have one of the highest rate of Black men are educated, highly educated. You know, it's often seen that they don't usually just stop at the undergraduate. They have their masters, they have doctorates. They then also position themselves well in quite good jobs, you know, and things like this. So in one aspect, they're looking at it, well, we are a positive catch. But then on the other aspect, then they don't now want to be, and this is something I keep hearing more and more. Well, if I'm earning 400,000, why would I be with someone who's earning 45,000? I mean, how's that work? So the actual mindset of women, of Black women, has also changed. And another terminology that I've been hearing a lot more from the younger generation of, say, 20s to 40 are she's a boss. And that statement, you know, that now these are like high flying, whether they're professional or entrepreneur or business women, and they run things. So in that capacity again, then are you negating the man? Because many of them are all single. So what is this mindset that we are now perpetuating? And then they will come with this, well, because I'm a strong Black woman, as you've said, but are you a strong Black woman because you're strong because you can manage to be on your own? Or are you strong because you've been through adversities and you're managing to, you know, overcome these challenges? And then they will say, well, they go with the white women because they're soft and they let them do what they want. And well, how, in what capacity? Because if they're looking for a relationship, and I've spoken to Black men, and they say they want to be able to be vulnerable with their woman and still be seen as strong. But because the Black woman is so strong, I can't come like I'm weak if I complain about a day at work. So I have to always be this man. So again, the thought process for the genders is also askew in my mindset. So with our mindset, are we outsourcing ourselves?
I think that the plantation needed Black women to be strong, right? It survived, the plantation system survived on the strength of Black women, right? And it also survived on narratives that Black men were weak and unreliable, right? And by doing that, the plantation would because you know there were more slaves than a slave. You know, there'd be a slave family, 5 or 6 people, whatever, and then you know it might be 100 slaves or 200 slaves or 50 slaves. There'll be more of them, so they have to have ways to maintain their system.
Right.
So dividing and was one of the ways in which it was done. All right. And so when slave masters would abuse black men in front of their women, all right, and that would bring disrespect, fear, anxiety between them. All right. So, and because the black man was feared, because there were many black men, young men on the plantation. Right. So you have to have a narrative that denigrates black masculinity. They used to have, in Jamaica, they would have seasoning farms. And on these seasoning farms, one of the things that they would take the black man who was a warrior type, you know, wanting to protect his community or wanting to fight for liberation, or, you know what I mean? Those types who, you know, the Nat Turner types, they would take them to the seasoning farms, and in the seasoning farms would be black men who were placed there to be broken. And one of the things that they used to do is to rape black men with everybody watching. All right. So and once they've broken them, they would put them back on the plantation. All right. So there were all these strategies that would then create such self-loathing on behalf of the black man and his broken spirit. And then the woman, you know, it would be very difficult for her to
embrace him as the man that he is.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then because the work of recovery never took place, it continues, but it just wears different clothes in 2020.
Right.
And there was that and lots of other things that have ensured that the DNA, the cultural DNA of separation and rejection and lack of affection continues. And as a result of that, that then breeds poverty in the black community.
Yeah.
So Claude Anderson talks about financial lovemaking, you see. So there's a relationship between black coupling and the economic development of black communities.
Right. Yes. And that's where I notice a disparity oftentimes with women that are, as they say, high earners. They then don't want to couple with someone who's not in the same earning bracket.
Right. So because black women don't understand the games that are being played and the narratives that are being sustained, they make the wrong decisions.
Yes.
So they make decisions as if they are from a different culture. They make decisions as if they've absorbed Western culture. And they make decisions based on that rather than decisions based on recovery,
relationship and the recovery and building an empire together. Yes, you know, and building the family. I mean, you know, I've always said my maths is not that great. That wasn't one of my best subjects. But even if you have 400,000 and that's 45,000, that's now 445,000. That's more than what you had before. So the two of you coming together has still made more in your pockets. So, you know, but this disparity that I'm seeing, and as I said, with this new terminology, and even when you watch programs that are being perpetuated more and more now, like Empire and oh gosh, what's that one with Kerry Washington? Oh, she works for the president. Oh my goodness.
I'm telling you, I don't have a telly.
Yeah, no.
The film, is it a film?
Yeah, it's a series. It was very, very big. You know, she was the black woman that was the most powerful, and the president was in love with her. But of course, because she's black, he's white, they couldn't be together.
Oh yeah, I think I saw that. Yeah.
I forgot what the series is called, but I was like, what is this?
Was it a Tyler Perry film?
No, but he has a few actually. But you know, and I was just like, why do they keep portraying us like this? And then when we do have programs, I mean, of course, we had the Cosby shows when we were growing up. You know, we had then they brought out things like My Wife and Kids, and then they had Blackish, which is one of the most recent ones. You know, and it's very small inserts of this is what the black family narrative could look like. You know, So again, if you're in a society and all you're seeing are, the Brady Bunch, or the different things like this, Little House on the Prairie, that's what I grew up with. That's not helping me on identifying with relationships, because our households don't run like that, you know.
So that's why I say it's really important. Black couples have a very important responsibility to get their acts together and to understand that their relationship is not just for them. Their relationship is a signal to the Black community that we can do Black love. And significantly, it's a signal to children. It's important for Black boys and girls to understand that Black people can do love. So it's not just about you. So as you said, I like what you said about 40,000, 45,000 plus 400,000, because once you understand how important it is to engage in love acts of recovery, you're going to see your Black brother completely differently. But if you're going to see it through a Western lens, and if you're going to see it through the plantation lens, then we will always be, the few Black men that are available, we will always be separated.
Someone just helped me out there. They said the program I'm talking about is Scandal. That is correct. That's what it was called. Right. Because I can't remember. So thank you very much there for one of our audiences.
Oh, I should look on the chat, shouldn't I?
So let me know. So you now have a course that is going to enlighten the minds of the Black woman. Okay. Just tell us, because we know time is practically gone. As I said, it goes quickly. How, what can a Black woman who participates in this course, and I do believe it's a 4-week course, but I mean over 4 months?
Yeah. No, it's only for one session per month.
But it's over
4 months, and so it gives you space to actually practice the things that you've gained. So as I said before, my work is about using sociology to illuminate social arrangements in societies. So I focus on post-enslaved societies. So I bring that to light through the sociological lens. So it's quite stimulating learning. So on one hand, it's very informative. So I do that. So we sort of unpick what has gone on, as I've tried to share in some of my answers. And then what we do, we apply the spiritual laws that are available, that God has made available for Black women to reposition themselves in the issue of gaining an effective, long-term, permanent relationship. All right, so that's what we do. So empowerment for Black women is about using. So one of the things that was interesting to me is the way in which my thesis was shouting at me in terms of what the solution is, because Black women generate a spiritual identity in order to survive. But I take it forward now and say the spiritual identity is not just about survival, it's about conquering, right? And it's about seizing abundance, and that it really is not, when the Bible speaks, I've come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. God means what he means. But we sort of neutralize all those things, and we say, well, Jesus died for me, and that's it. And then you sort of stop through. Do you know what I mean?
That's it.
You don't realize that when he did that, he opened up the portals for us. That's why Satan doesn't want us to have abundance. And so I sort of take them through, and everything that I take them through is stuff that I've practiced in my own life. So I was married and then divorced, and then there were things that I did through revelation.
I want to give you a caveat there. I have observed that once a woman has been married, somehow she seems to be able to attract to be married again. And she's been married, but the single woman will still be single, haven't even had a chance to marry.
One of my friends was married and had 5 children.
Right.
She was married, had 5 children, divorced.
Yeah, and married again.
And she married a pastor. She's traveling all over the world now. So that's part of it. You see, is about understanding why that happens, why that happens, and that's linked with the being long-term celibacy and what that signals, you know, in society and its meanings in society.
Right.
So when I've spoken to men about that, they say, because men will choose, they choose from a position of power.
Mm.
So they will choose, they're more likely to choose a woman that has been chosen by a man than
Oh,
one that hasn't been chosen.
at all. Right. Okay.
And so
Okay.
that's why it's important to employ the spiritual understandings to reposition yourself, you know,
Mm.
to me, you know, so that you actually position yourself as someone to be chosen,
Right. Right.
right? So when something is rare, when something is broken, you know, it does require some sort of radical spiritual approach,
Right.
not some sort of generalized approach to it. You've got to go into warfare, but you
Mm-hmm.
have to understand how to do that. So my course is about enabling women to go into warfare so they're better prepared. They understand greater, and it, you know, once you come through the course, you will develop a greater passion for spirituality and for intimate relationship with God. That intensifies. And it does give you a greater sense of well-being. And I talk about the yellow brick road. It sort of opens up that yellow brick road. You know, Alice in Wonderland, whoever it was that was dancing on the
Yeah.
yellow brick road. It's that kind of
Go into the, go to the Wizard of Oz.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Wizard of Oz. Yeah, uh,
Yeah.
Diana Ross. You know, doing her thing. So it sort of takes you. It opens up that road for you to continue your journey.
Right.
Otherwise, the course would be for a year. But it's about giving you, you know, the stuff that you already know, that, you know, so from milk you're moving into hard food, and you're moving into hard food that is based on your particular desire to marry, you
Right.
know, you
So
know,
in other
so
words, if someone came in, and we're going to use those terms, they're shackled, they've been in a stronghold. By once they encounter this course, they should come by free. They should be now comfortable in their sin, confident within their singleness, but being available. Because one of the things I have heard from men is that oftentimes with women that are single, they seem so closed, and that they don't feel comfortable to approach them because the woman doesn't seem to be available, you
yeah,
know.
that's it's, yeah, because the woman has absorbed what society says about being unchosen. So
Right.
that because of that, she doesn't get chosen.
Yeah.
As well. Sometimes she does, you know, because this is what's interesting about, because what everything I say, there will always be an exception.
Of course.
Sociology is about trends in general, whatever.
Right.
Because somebody say, "But I have got a friend," but that's why I say I'm not a psychologist. This is not about
Right.
psychology. It's about in general,
Right.
right? And the Bible tells us about spiritual laws that are available to us as people in the world in
Right.
general. In
Right.
general. So
So how can our audience get onto your course? You've got a website. If you just tell your website, so that they can know where to go and
well,
have
I'll tell you, if you want to get on the course, you need to email me, and then
Okay.
I'll send you some information. So the email is Val Bernard Allan at gmail.com.
Okay. So I'll get that.
Val Bernard Allan at
Okay.
gmail.com. And so there's that. That's my email. Then one website to get the book is sistersconversations.com.
Okay. And then you have and I know
My
I tend
website
to,
in
yeah,
general, like if you want to find out about me. And then the PhD's on my website if you want to look into that.
okay. And
Because,
so I've just put that up. And then what's the sorry, you said it's www dot what sisters, because I'm putting it on the screen.
sistersconversations.com.
Okay.
And then so the course is I have quite a few women that have stepped forward for the course. We actually kick off next week Sunday at 9:15 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
It's for 3 hours, just over 3 hours on
Okay.
Zoom.
Right.
And so we're starting off on the 19th, and then we next session is in August. Can't
Right.
remember what date it is in August.
Right.
But I'll send you all that information if you email me. I say to women, if you are interested, you should email me now. You should
Yes.
tomorrow, you know, and whatever. And there's quite a few women trying to get on the course. So, and I've only got so many seats left. So,
Right.
and I'm not being funny. I'm just, you know, like, I'm not trying to be, you know, it's just
No,
like,
you have got people that are really interested, and I know that. So, you know, I'm
it's
actually
35, it's £35 per month. At the moment, it
right,
stands at £40 per
right,
month. So I'm doing it at a, you know, sort of promotional rate.
right,
I've run it before. The women paid more than that, but because we're doing Zoom and everything, I'm doing it just to get it out there.
right.
So
No,
yes,
I've got people are actually saying to me, where do they get that from? And as you can see, people are saying they love this, they love the topic this
I can't
evening.
see anything. I can only see you. I can
Oh,
see.
okay. You're not
I don't
seeing.
even know where my chat is. I'm looking for
Oh,
it whilst I'm talking to you. I've got leave studio, share screen, cam mute, so blah blah blah.
oh, you can't
I don't know
see.
what's going on. I can see Leo Smart said, "I love this."
Right, yeah. So different people are putting things up, and they're interested. So I put that also in the chat so they can get that information. As she said, she has a book on it as well. But I think, women, this will be a real positive course that many of you who are single would be able to learn from and grow and develop. And you know, it's not, I mean, for me, it is not to say that, and I want us to get away from that stigma that, especially when you're in a Christian community, that if you're not married, then there's something wrong with you. You know, that's just foolishness. You know, you have, to me, you have to love yourself and be happy within yourself before you can join with someone else. Because, you know, who wants to be with someone who's miserable? You know, and they say miserably likes company, so maybe they won't be miserable. But you know, at the end of the day, you want to go with someone that you're going to grow and develop and share life with, you know, and build. And as you said, you know, you start off in one spot and you want to, you know, move forward from there. And now we have much more emphasis on, you know, Black Lives Matter, you know, the new Black Wall Street, and people trying to identify and you know, assert themselves as, you know, human beings on an equal footing.
Right. So I say I agree with you. One of the things that I say is, I think one of the most powerful moments for me when I was driving my car and I was, you know, sort of questioning God about where does he want me to take this work? Because I was doing stuff. And then it was just like he said, it matters. Tell them it matters to me that Black women are single. So that's what I want you to say. I want you to say that it matters to me that Black women are single.
Yeah.
And with me, they can do something about it. So it's really important for Black women to realize that it really does matter to God, and some of the resignation that Black women feel is part of that intergenerational pathology. So that we sort of, our posture is one of we're very, because we believe we're strong, we'll go for stuff, but we're resigned and we feel as if sorry, whatever, feel as if
You have a visitor.
feel as if we failed if we don't secure a partner. But that is socially constructed. It's
Right.
that's what's in society out there because of its obsession around coupling. But you
Right.
don't have to absorb. You're going to learn how not to absorb that, but at the same time, be true to your desires,
Right.
and you know, take that journey with God, an abundant journey towards what it is that you've decided. And for me, that is salvation. The trajectory of my course is about salvation. It's about healing. The word salve means healing. So the trajectory is upward, you know,
Right.
and that is what salvation is about. Some people think because Jesus is coming, they shouldn't do anything. And I've been told, what are you doing that work for? Jesus soon come. Do you know what I mean? But if somebody had cancer, and they wanted to get better,
Yeah, you're
nobody
gonna
would say to
see.
them,
Right.
Jesus is coming, don't do anything about it. So if our culture is being broken, we have a responsibility
To help rebuild it.
to help rebuild it.
Yeah, fantastic.
We need
So
to help rebuild it.
I just want to say thank you so much for sharing. I know there's many people that are saying this topic is brilliant. We don't usually discuss things like this. I want to promote again the book by Dr. Val Bernard Allan is The 7 Habits for Black Women Who Want to Marry. So if you want to be a Black woman married, or any woman, I'm sure you can learn from it. That's a book for you to purchase. If you want to sign up on the course, and she only has a few spaces left because it starts next Sunday, you can contact her directly at valbernardallan@gmail.com, or you can go to the website, which is www.sistersconversations.com.
Well, that's where they get the book from, Sisters Conversations.
Right, the book. Okay.
Yeah, but when they email me, I send them the other stuff.
All the information. Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to be able to share and talk about this issue with you. I know it's such an impactful issue to many, many Black women. And, the younger generation are experiencing it a lot more as well. And, just one more thing. Would you say, and I just want to hear your opinion, many have said that another reason why Black women are still single is because they won't date, they won't interracially date. Do you think that could be an impact?
Well, definitely, yeah. That's one of the reasons. But studies show that, well, from what I've read anyway, that other races tend to prefer their own.
Right.
They tend to. So there's a woman called.
That's what I've observed.
A woman called Emma Dabari. She's a sociologist as well, and she did the documentary on the dating or something. Right. And she had heterosexual, homosexual individuals there, and there was something that was consistent, which is the way in which all the different ethnicities, Chinese, Asian, African, they all preferred to be with a white person. That was like, yeah, there was a tendency. Very few, when they, were interested, the white guys in general were not interested in Black women. And I know that, of course, there are white men that are interested in Black women and Asian men that are interested in, but the general trend reflects that global trajectory that I spoke to you about. And it is a lie. Mm-hmm. It is a lie. So we need to stand in that, understanding that it is a lie. But Satan is an arch deceiver, mm-hmm. and many people are deceived. And we break that down. And God has created a new frequency for Black women. I say, in closing, what I will say is that if there's any time in the history of the planet that Black women can begin to change that trajectory in terms of height, it's now.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I just want to applaud you. Thank you so much. I'm excited at the opportunity that many of these women will experience. And once again, I want to say thank you for spending this evening with us and sharing the great work that you do.
Thank you very much.
All our audience out there, I hope that you were truly blessed and you've learned, and you also now got a taste to learn more. So please touch base if anything and you don't have all the information, you can contact me and I can give that to you. But otherwise, have a great week. And for all of the women that are single, I don't want to hear any excuses now. You have an opportunity to change this. Get on this course. Bye all and stay blessed.